Thank you. So I will call to order the July 12th, 2022 meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission. We'll start off with our script for remotely conducted open meetings. Good evening. My name is Arthur Gasparo, Nantucket Airport Commission Chairman. Welcome to the July 12th, 2022 Airport Commission meeting. The open meeting is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. As a preliminary matter, permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Ms. Planzer?
Here.
Mr. Viscarin?
Here.
Mr. Marks?
Here.
And I don't see Ms. Topham. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Rafter?
Here, Mr. Chair, Jeanette's email comes up. I don't see her video, but she may have audio.
Ms. Topham, well, if you can join in, then we'll get the video on. Like I said, I see her in the participant list as well. Hopefully she can join and we'll come back to her. Mr. Carberg?
Here.
Ms. Stoyakova-Nelson?
Here.
Ms. Stansbury?
Jamie will not be attending this evening.
Okay, thank you. Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Macarius?
Hello.
Mr. Sukop?
Present.
And Mr. Lasden?
Present.
Thank you. For this meeting, we're convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. The meeting will be aired at a later time on the Town of Nantucket YouTube channel. Please note this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We're now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for the effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I'll go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names, be acknowledged by, and speak through the chair. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The Commission reserves the right to remove any member of the public from the meeting who doesn't use a full name or acts inappropriately. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And with that, we'll move to the agenda as published. And I see Ms. Topham has joined us. Can you hear me, Ms. Topham?
I can now, yes, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Is there any questions, comments, or concerns with the agenda as posted?
No,
Hearing none, we'll adopt the agenda by unanimous consent. Is there a motion to adopt the draft 6/14/22 minutes, or any questions, comments, or concerns regarding those minutes? Any concerns or thank you. Get some background noise somewhere. Thanks. Is there a motion to approve the draft minutes from June 14th?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
second,
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
aye,
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We need to ratify the June 22nd, 2022 warrant. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns, or a motion to ratify that warrant?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
And with that, we have our next item is public comment. And please raise your virtual hand or wave at me through the video if you'd like to speak on public comment. For members of the public who are here related to, this is for items that are not otherwise on the agenda. We will accept public comment related to the agenda items as well. So we'll be seeking public comment for any items that are not otherwise listed on the agenda. Okay, hearing none, and I don't see any hands raised. We'll move on to pending leases and contracts as set forth on Exhibit 1. Mr. Rafter.
Thank you. The first is an estoppel certificate with Brookfield Assets. This is for their bank to confirm that Brookfield is in good standing with the airport for refinancing purposes. Next is a airline lease agreement with Ross Retrix for their ground handling operations, and that's a business fee of $1,500. Also have a license agreement with the town of Nantucket for the Delta Fields. This is a 10-year with two 10-year extensions. It's the Delta Ball Fields for $19,154. We have a contract amendment with T2 Systems for $12,051. That's for another handheld device for doing electronic chalking in our parking lot. We also have a contract with Computer Assistance Services for not to exceed $240,625 over a 3-year period. That's for our IT services and support. We have a contract with ATG Patriot LLC in the amount of $249,987. That's replacement of Airport 7, which is a dump truck. And we have a contract amendment with Jacobs Engineering for $18,883. It's a supplemental agreement for additional work that was done on the fuel farm in relation to the commissioning, as well as a conversion of the avgas tank to jet fuel. Before I close, I would, in full disclosure, the computer assistance contract, we're requesting approval of that, but we are awaiting some final documentation, an update on some insurance papers. So we won't have that signed until we receive all the documentation. But I request the approval of that.
Thank you, Mr. Rafter. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns with any of the pending leases or contracts?
Yes,
Yeah.
I do.
Mr. Viscara, the floor is yours.
We're leasing the Delta Fields to the town. That lease states that they have failed to pay past fees of $270,000. When do we declare them in breach of this contract?
I failed to mention, I apologize, that back due will be applied to the subsidy that the town gave to the airport. So that will come off the subsidy, and then going forward, they'll be paying us.
Has the town agreed to that?
Yes, and it's on the select board agenda for tomorrow evening.
If I could, Mr. Viscara, I just put on the screen exhibit 1 before the select board for tomorrow night. So in case anybody knows, this wouldn't have been a document that was in our packet, but it's posted as part of the selectmen packet.
Good.
So they're considering this tomorrow night.
So I apologize. The select board has to approve it, but town council and town administration has approved it.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns pending leases and contracts?
No.
Is there a motion to approve the exhibit 1 as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Pending matters, we have Mr. Rafter, the capital approval process home rule petition update.
Yes, Senator Sears' office has indicated that the document needs to be updated with some slight word changes, and that has to be approved by the select board. That is also on the agenda for the select board tomorrow evening, and Senator Sears' office indicated that once that's approved, they expect it to move quickly through the process. So hoping to get approval for that tomorrow night as well.
Is there anything or action or support that is needed from the commission for that?
I don't think so. Again, it's very minor word changes just for consistency. They wanted to make a couple of tweaks to it, so shouldn't be any issue.
Thank you. Any commissioners, any questions or comments regarding that process?
No.
To Mr. Rafter or Mr. Carberg for the PFAS investigation update.
I'll turn that over to Noah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rafter. There is a activity report appended in your packet. The numbers are the same as last month, I believe, 527 samples taken from 79 individual wells. Regarding the task order phase 2 investigation status, which is MJPN 11 Amendment 2 for $304,000. All POET systems have been decommissioned. Weston has received preliminary results from the spring sampling and will assemble the August IRA status report. We also have a round of synoptic water level and sampling scheduled for airport wells in August. From an administrative standpoint, the downgrading property status and potentially productive aquifer exclusion expansion filings will be written later this summer or earlier this fall, and the review process for us is similar to that for an IRA update. On the water service project, punch list work remains. Most of this has to do with landscaping. For the water main project, again, it's punch list level work. Landscaping as people have come back and as landscaping has come back, or in some cases, maybe not bloomed as expected. We'll continue to address those items. For Skyline Drive, the repaving and rehabilitation project, paving is anticipated for completion by the end of this week, with restoration for the week after. And for public communication, I am going to defer those items for the next item on the agenda, for which I know we have community representation. Are there any questions?
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Carberg on the status of the current investigation, or for, we also do have Mr. Sukop and Mr. Lasden in attendance, Mr. Macarius? Okay, thank you. Please keep us posted. Appreciate the updates. And just to be clear, there'll be a quarterly report for our next commission meeting. Did I hear that correctly?
There will be an IRA status report for August. I'm not sure at this time if that will be available for the August meeting or the September meeting based on time frame.
Thank you. Any other discussion or comment on the status of the investigations? Okay.
Mr. Gasparo,
Yes, Mr. Hoffman.
I have a question. Is this about the McKay's letter also, or is that another item?
That'll be the next agenda item,
Okay, thank you.
which we will move right on to.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a brief introduction for the item on it's what we colloquially call the bottled water service policy. So this agenda item concerns a review of the Commission's PFAS water service policy that was executed on 11/10/2020 and then revised April 12, 22 to codify the process for cessation of bottled water service. Specifically, the policy identified a 90-day continuance for bottled water provision by the airport following the completion of the water utility installation in the area, with a 30-day additional extension available upon request. In your packet are 2 letters from 2 households who are not adjacent to the water infrastructure, but who will have such availability commensurate with a future town project. I have appended a letter from Mr. and Mrs. McKay and from myself on behalf of Ms. Baker. They were both scheduled to have service cease on August 25th. They have each taken advantage of the 30-day extension and are now scheduled to have their water services cease on their bottled water service cease on September 22nd. I see that, we have some households and members of the public who are in attendance virtually, and I believe they wish to address the commission. Also in attendance, we have Mr. Mina Macarius from Airport Council and Mr. Jim Sukop from Weston Solutions to answer any questions. Airport staff are available as well, but I have no further introductory remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Carberg. So, and we certainly want to hear from all of the members of the public. We've received your letters, take them seriously, understand the concerns, and I think it's fair to say are want to work to address those concerns to the extent that we legally can, and what could be done. I did just find some information today posted for the select board where they have an update tomorrow night regarding the water service project. And I'm not sure if you're aware of that or not, but they're using a state revolving fund to fund that project, which has set timelines associated with it. And what they've published for their packet is that the application and design of the project has to be completed by October 14th of this year. So there is an actual track for the project that the town is pursuing in the water company, which I think is positive for all parties, both the residents with concerns as well as with the airport. And so it says that the construction contract has to be executed by June 30th of next year, and that they're seeking to have all construction done by 2025. So at least there is it's been approved at town meeting. There is a track that the town has taken to get that water line out to you. And would like to, I think, hear what all of you, have to say, however you'd like to address the commission. We are, I think, then as a commission going to, and we do have our consultants here as well, deliberate to some extent how we may be able to address those concerns, what might be available, and hopefully I'll try to work together on this, understanding how concerning it is to everybody involved. And with that, I would be happy to open it up to the public if you would like to make any comments. Mr. McKay, you're muted, sir.
How's that? There you go.
Much better. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for the time. I appreciate it. I'm assuming that everyone there has had an opportunity to read the letter. So what I'm going to say is obviously a little bit repetitive in terms of the points that I made. One of the higher points there was the point that Mr. Carberg had me look at, that just the verbiage of it really struck me when it came down to, and I'll quote it as best I can, but it said the slight reduction in risk does not justify the cost associated with continuance of bottled water. Now, that may not be 100% accurate, but it is basically there. And the sentiment there is that health concerns of the contributing members of the community for so many years seem to fall under the concern for money. And with the money that was the verbiage that was used in the certified letter we received was a projection of over 30 years, which would cost the town $3 million. Well, those numbers are impressive and scary, but we're all talking about the fact that it's not going to be 30 years. It's going to be a much, much shorter period of time, anywhere from 1 to 3. So that being the case, along with other points that we've discussed in previous conversations, the likelihood of myself, prostate cancer, my next door neighbor, my brother, prostate cancer, my next door neighbor on the other side, prostate cancer, my wife, thyroid issues, 4 dogs dying of cancer. We'll never scientifically conclusively say that it was due to PFAS, but the connection is just too clear not to discard altogether. And when you use the words "when the water was delivered at first," which, as I said in my letter, I do appreciate. There's no question about it. It is appreciated. But the word was used out of an abundance of caution. And now it just seems like caution is now no longer a concern. Money is a concern. when water is coming in a relatively short period of time, it would seem to be the right thing to do to continue the bottled water to make sure that we are in fact safe until we can get the town water. And lastly, something I was not able to include in my letter, but came subsequently, was the new EPA guidelines, or not new guidelines, advisories, I should say, which interestingly change the threshold, which actually leads to a lot of other issues as well. With the thresholds we've all known of 20 parts per trillion, the new advisory, and I see Aisha's here as well, who went to the PFAS conference and can speak to it directly, that the guidelines for PFAS, PFOAs and such have gone down to well below 1 part per trillion. Well, that would indicate my 12.3, taken that one time, is now well above, and therefore I'm at risk. So science will show that in probably October, November, and correct me if I'm wrong, Aisha, that these advisories will become guidelines. What happens then? So I'm asking for logic and compassion to be put into place to at minimum continue the bottled water until the town water gets in here, especially when science is showing every week, it seems, new, more serious concerns about these forever chemicals. No one knows 100% about it, and there's a lot of different opinions, but science is relatively clear. These are scary things and they're going to be around forever, and it's only likely to get worse. Given all that flux, to me, it seems the logical and compassionate and fair thing to do just to continue the bottled water for $9 grand a month, whatever it may be, until we get it, which is not going to be in 30 years. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McKay, for your thoughtful and reasonable comments. Ms. Khan?
Hi, thank you. And thank you for allowing me to attend this meeting. My question was about this, the new health advisory. So prior to that, we do have an MCL, and I'm kind of concerned and questioning. So how does the health advisory, the new health advisory that we have, that will turn into a national drinking standard on a national level, affect our MCLs with the state? Now, the state has a combined MCL of 20 parts per trillion, which in the next year will be also probably regulated and more stringent. It's very clear, the writing's on the wall. And what takes place? So if it's 20 parts per trillion, we're saying, okay, your PFO can be 12 and it's completely fine, and we're not going to hook you up to town water because it's under the threshold. But if our health advisory saying anything above that can cause health effects, and the health advisory for PFOA is 0.004, which is basically zero, I mean, I can't see that and not speak up. I have a very hard time. So I hope that we can work together to make sure that we take all these precautions. We follow the science. It's very clear. They've taken a very long time. This is not a new chemical. PFOA and PFOS they call it an emerging contaminant because it hasn't been regulated, but it has been studied for now 20 years, and there is well-documented information on this. So if the request is to have bottled water, I will second that. And this is just me speaking on my own. I do hope we can look at areas beyond the areas that we've covered right now, because plumes move, as we know, they move. And also, which chemicals are we looking at? The depths of the wells. I'm struggling to see that information is very sound, that we're saying it ends here. I have to say that I feel the plume has moved, and I'm worried, and this is just my opinion, that there may be people beyond the areas that we're looking at who have PFAS in their water. And I hope that we can address it, whether it's looking at a total organic fluorine test, working ways towards that I can assist, or whether it's hooking people up to town waters. And I think our community in general would be very supportive of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak? Ms. Huber?
Yeah, I just want to second and third what both Aisha and Peter and Allison have to say, because It's very disconcerting that the water line came down Montahasset behind our houses. There was no consideration in terms of bringing it in front of our houses so we could tie into it. We've been on bottled water now for 2 years and you're telling us you're cutting us off. And I think I think the humanity of the situation is very inappropriate because some of us are suffering really badly from cancer and other issues, health issues that I feel are directly related to 30 years of drinking this water. And I think the least the airport commission can do is continue our water supply until they can get town water down here. Have had a meeting with Mark Willett. Do know that, you know, he's planning on bringing it down. It could be a year, it could be 2 years, it could be 3 years. But for those of us who have to, you know, deal with this unexpectedly and out of the blue 2 years ago, finding out about it has been totally disruptive of our lives and everything. So I just concur that I think the airport commission should do the humane and the right thing and continue our water supply until we have town water down here. And I don't understand why we didn't have it come down Montahasset Road. So at least some of us who have tested positive could have hooked in instead of it's 100 feet from my house, but behind my house on airport property. So I just think that was cruel, kind of like dangling a carrot, but you can't eat it. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Huber. Any other members of the public wish to speak? Either-
It's Adam Ross. My camera's not working, but can you?
Please go ahead, Mr. Ross.
I just want to reiterate what the other guy said. We're in the same boat, right beside the fence, right beside the water line that we can't use. So we'd really appreciate if they could just continue the water until we get a proper plan and action of when we can connect to town water.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Any other members of the public? I see there are some folks on the participant list. You can either turn your camera on or raise your hand or speak up, and I certainly will recognize you. Okay, hearing none. I think that we could turn it to our consultants to give each of, if you had anything that you would like to add in response, or if you didn't and the commission wants to discuss this. And then if the commissioners have any discussion questions for the consultants, they're certainly here. Mr. Lasden, anything you want to add at this point, or you want to stand by?
I will stand by. I think Mr. Sukoff is probably where we want to go with this next.
Mr. Sukoff?
Yeah, I think I can certainly offer some maybe some insight with regard to the recent EPA screening level guidance that was put out. It is definitely confusing. I understand that. I can see that, and we're running into this with on a lot of other sites as well. It's a little unfortunate, the timing of it. The number that was put out was the numbers that were put out were very low. As you know, they are not enforceable. They are guidelines at this point. They are just beginning the public comment and public comment period, and those numbers will be scrutinized over the next realistically year and a half, 2 years before they are promulgated. It's likely that those numbers will change. Right now, they are just they're so low that it's just not feasible to even test for those levels that they've got. So I do think Mr. McKay said it very well. There's a lot of science that is out there. A lot of it's conflicting, and that's going to have to be hashed out in the public forum over the next couple of years to see where the EPA MCLs finally end up. My personal opinion, I don't see them staying that low. It's just not feasible. But we'll have to see. But in any event, the values that apply currently and for the foreseeable future are the Massachusetts MCP criteria that we've been using. So that hopefully clarifies that situation a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Sukop. Mr. McKay, I'm going to go around once and then I'll certainly come back. You'll have an opportunity. Um, Mr. Macarius, would you like to add anything at this point or stand by?
I'll just add a quick comment. I don't have anything to add on the science. I think Mr. Suka summarized the legal effect of the standards pretty well. And I certainly appreciate the situation and the comments. And just as a reminder, both for the commission and the public, of how the commission got to its current position. The airport commission has been trying to work under sort of two separate areas of regulation. Just as a reminder, one is the environmental side, and following the lead of what DEP requires in the mass contingency plan. At the same time, following your obligations as a federally supported and federally obligated airport in terms of how you use airport revenue, and some of the decision making has to take that into account as well of the limitations there. That there are policy choices within there. I'm not suggesting all avenues are closed or that it's black and white. There's actually some gray area, but just as a reminder to sort of why the setup is how it is. Federal law permits the airport to spend money on environmental obligations that it's legally required to address. The scope of what's required versus not, as Ms. Kant actually pointed out, this is an emerging contaminant in the sense that it's newly regulated, not in the sense of when the company's putting it, who made this stuff knew some of the risks. And so trying to figure out what's currently required by varying levels of federal and state environmental entities can be a little complicated. So I know a lot of the commissioners understand that, but just to sort of repeat it for those listening in and putting that into the context as well.
Thank you, Mr. Macarius. Mr. Carberg or Mr. Rafter, anything you want to add or you want to reserve comment?
No, I'll wait. Thank you.
I'll reserve comment. Thank you.
All right, so we'll go to the commission now, I think, to discuss how we might want to proceed, or questions from commissioners to, I think, through the chair, either to members of the public or our consultants, should you have any questions in response. I will start off, if that's okay, with just a couple of points. Having been involved since sort of this started, I think all of us, really, most of us have, in that, the sort of work in reverse, the point of the water line not being at the location where you can connect to it. I agree is unfortunate. And that was dictated essentially by the statutes and obligations that were just referenced by Mr. Macarius in terms of if the airport would be at risk of those grant obligations if the money had been spent to put the water line where DEP wasn't mandating it to be done. Now, I'm with you. It doesn't logically seem to make sense to have it on the other side than where it went. But I think that we were in a position where there really sort of wasn't a choice, at that time. And I think the solution to that has been this town project, because I think it was recognized by, the airport, the water company, and the town that ultimately, that water line should be available. And so, that was also, while the airport fast-tracked the water line to the houses that were in exceedance of the DEP threshold, the town is also, and I think our community, expediting this other project. So, I'm with you that it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense that way, but there is a reason for it in terms of a regulatory framework and position. And that's sort of my understanding of it. And again, I'm open to, additional comment or correction from consultants, legal or staff on that. in terms of the water policy, and what the commission, I think, has to deliberate is, given the fact that there is now this town project with a finite period out ahead of us, that it's not essentially indefinite, and given the all of the factors and the science, as you've said, is there a way that the commission could through our consultants and legal counsel craft a revised policy that would allow for the limited water service for some period of time, so that it doesn't have to end right now, given everything that's going on. And so I think that's a decision for the commission to make, whether we're all supportive of trying to craft something like that or not. And then we would, ultimately, I believe if that was the case, we went the direction we went, we would bring it forward, continue the water for another month, and then have some actual language that could be deliberated and voted on at our next meeting. So that's one alternative that I see. In terms of one of the other things I wanted to respond to, Ms. Khan, with respect to investigations, we're not done. They're ongoing. That was the previous agenda item. I know there's part of a lot wrapped in there, but we have active contracts with Weston Solutions and McFarland Johnson related to continued, groundwater investigations, other sites. And, like I said, it's certainly, that's just not wrapped up. And I don't know, when it will be, or if it ever will be in this situation like this. But we're still working on it. And I don't want you to think, or the public to think, that we sort of are saying, okay, there's a water line in, and the airport's sort of done with this. And I do think that also branches into the discussion that I mentioned, in terms of, most of you are probably aware, but if not, tomorrow night's select board meeting has an agenda item for the presentation of and I those materials are available online as a supplement that they just posted. In terms of, their investigation is really focusing on PFAS in the wastewater stream and how that's getting there. And that, the town has spent, I think the number I saw on there was $900-something thousand to date. And so, it's the airport, it's also the town. I think that we have to acknowledge that, PFAS was likely, distributed throughout our community by other manners than just, AFFF. It was, the biosolids likely, there's simply the fact that it exists in so many products. It's so widespread, so huge, that, I think that it's encouraging, if there is some encouragement in this, to see, that the town is also taking a role to look at, where this is community wide. And I think also to express to the public that the commission is certainly, still active in the airport, still actively engaged in this, the studies and doing what we can. And I think that, we really did everything that we could. We might not all agree, but when it came to getting that water line put in and working as fast and as hard, and choosing that as the ultimately the best thing that you could do for the situation that we had, was to, provide the municipal water service as wide, where you could. So with that, that's my comments, and certainly welcome other commissioners' thoughts on that, should you have any. Mr. Marks.
Yeah, I was just curious, the water main is on the back of their house. Is there any prohibited? Is it prohibited that we could offer an easement for a water tap off of that line and let them run it in the back? It doesn't really matter. I've seen it done many other times, run across people's properties that didn't have water access to the water main. I don't know if there's you know what I mean? It's already there. We paid to put it in there. Why shouldn't they be able to tap it in from the other side?
Mr. Lasden, is that something you could address?
Yes, Mr. Gasparo, we had looked into that early on, and I believe after some conversations with the water department, it was decided that that probably wouldn't be the best place to have a water tap, because they would have to access the airfield if they had to turn on and off the water or maintain the water. They would have to access the security portion of the airfield to get to it. So there was a concern. It can be readdressed, but there was a concern with having the water department access the airfield.
Thank you, Mr. Lasden. Mr. Rafter, Mr. Carberg, anything that you'd like to add to whether that's something that we, Mr. Marx's idea is something, you know, as we're considering the water service, is there a way to, you know, is it worth looking at that as an interim option? And then especially knowing that the other water line is coming, maybe, you know,
I think it's certainly a viable alternative to review and look at again. I mean, we provide access to different folks that come onto the airport and do maintenance on things, so we could certainly look at that, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marks. That's a very, you know, good point. And maybe that's, you know, something that we can also look at and certainly get back to have as part of the discussion for our next meeting. Any other commissioners?
Mr. Gasparo?
Yes, Ms. Topham.
I would like to continue on this and set up a policy that we continue with the water bottles for the, and I know that's what we're going to discuss at some next, maybe the next meeting, but I would encourage us to do that, please.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, I think we, you have anything to say, Arthur? I don't want to interrupt.
No, go ahead, Mr. Buscarin. Thank you.
Sure. I don't think the public truly understands that we don't have a free hand to do whatever we want to do. The commission is, since the FAA pays almost all of our bills, we are essentially in a straitjacket with regard to what we can spend money on. And we're under the burden of a letter from legal counsel suggesting that extending bottled water could be considered and might likely be considered a diversion of airport revenue. So I think that needs to be addressed in the short term by the commission before we make any decision.
Thank you, Mr. Buscarin. Anyone else? So I appreciate you also reiterating those points, Mr. Buscarin, because that is exactly the situation. You think you said it better than I did in terms of why the water line was where it was instead of where we probably would have just wanted to put it if we could. Perhaps though, with this finite timeline, ultimate situation of water coming, you know, maybe there is a way for the limited group of homes that have had, you know, above, you know, well, not over the DEP threshold, but detectable, you know, it's not just everybody gets bottled water. It's got a limited policy could be formulated, and we could at least have some language to contemplate if, you know, council thinks that's possible, you know, to try to come up with something that serves both purposes for this amount of time. And, you know, I think it's worth trying to see what we can do here. And so I will go back to the public. Ms. Khan.
Yes, thank you. And I have 3 points actually. So the first one with the diversion of the airport revenue, I understand that. And I think information like that is helpful to understand where you guys are coming from, and perhaps help the public understand better. But at the end of the day, what is a person supposed to do, you know, who's getting this water and say, oh, okay, it's kind of like, I don't know, we live in a community. We should be doing our best to do whatever we need to make sure that people who we care about have clean access to water, and to not minimize this. This is not a little chemical. This is going to grow, and this is a terrible, terrible chemical that is very pervasive, and it's in our community, fellow community members' waters. We can't just sit here and say, I've got my hands tied, go deal with the airport. The airport say, go deal with the town. It's very confusing. And quite honestly, they shouldn't have to deal with anyone. We should be trying to do our best to take care of it. And that's where, wouldn't this fall under the lawsuit? Is it this cost that we've all entered this lawsuit? The state has entered this lawsuit. So it shouldn't really be the burden of the McKays or Mimi or any of us to fight this hard for clean water, quite honestly. That's why we're suing, to make sure we get access to this. So I would encourage that we not make it people's burden to fight this hard to get water access to it. The second point that I had was with the health advisory. So health advisory, that new health advisory is based on years and decades of science. And it is a health advisory that does not take risk assessment into the calculation. So correct, it is very, very low. It is basically zero, stating 0 is the safe level. Anything above 0 is what we deem acceptable. So as far as a health concerns, anything above that is what the EPA is saying, 0.004 parts per trillion. We're going into quadrillion, measurements. Anything above that, you can have a health effect. And I worry that we dismiss that and I'll use the McKays if you don't mind, because I looked at your water reports, if you're okay with me talking about it. They're under the 20 parts per trillion, right? So they're under the 20 parts per trillion, and we're saying it's safe to drink your water. However, the new health advisory, which is confusing, but it is saying for PFOA, which they have 5.7, 0.004 is not safe. Anything above that could potentially cause a health effect. So it is very clear, the connection. This could potentially cause a health effect, and especially at vulnerable times when you're drinking it. Now, what was it 15 years ago, 20 years ago when Allison was pregnant during a vulnerable period? Yes, it could have had more potential effects. So to dismiss it and say, it's MCL, we shouldn't look at it, is a little worrisome to me. And then the third point is that they are going to most likely increase it because they have to take in the risk assessment and all of these into accounts. If they keep it at 0.004 and 0.02 for PFOS, we'll shut down all of our water systems. No one can meet this. It's in all of our waters, basically. They're saying this is the health advisory. The numbers
we got it. We got it. Ms. Khan.
Five and 10
Ms. Khan.
probably what they're going to come to, and that probably will be by this year. So
Okay. Ms. Khan,
Sorry.
we're getting a little repetitive. We got it. We've said it. It's certainly not fair to say that we're being dismissive, or try to hide behind this. We're doing absolutely everything that we possibly can and to stay both compliant and be considerate to the neighbors. And again, there may be a disagreement there, but I hope that the actions of the commission and the airport, show that we're trying. We have to make sure that we, still remain a federally funded airport that can provide all of the operations and safety that has to be done, and at the same time do everything we possibly can for the neighbors. We live in this community too, so please don't cast aspersion that we don't care, because that's not the truth.
Mr. Chair, Matt,
Mr. Rafter.
to some of that as well, and it gets very confusing when the goalposts keep moving here. If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Lazen and Mr. Sokup, you may know better than I do, but I thought there was a result somewhere else on the island that was significantly or above the 20. And DEP came out with a statement essentially that said, well, if it's, up to 50, you're okay to drink it. So, that happened, I think, just prior to this HAL coming out from EPA. And I understand completely. I want you to understand that we're trying to do the best we can, but it's like, kick the ball through the uprights, but they keep moving. So we're trying to deal with all of it. And I don't know where they're all going to come out, but I can certainly understand your plight because I face a lot of the same conditions that many of you do. So.
Thank you, Mr. Rafter. Mr. McKay.
Thanks. The goalposts, they're certainly changing, and I appreciate and respect it's a difficult job you all have as far as that's concerned. I realize that. However, one aspect that has not changed is the insistence on sticking not at the DEP, but at the EPA level of the 20 parts per trillion for so long. My number is 12.3. I drank the water for the entire period of time. My family did, my kids did, my wife was pregnant, so on and so forth. Now, the very same organization that put the 20 parts per trillion has brought it down. In response to Mr. Sukup there too, you're right. It's not going to stay at 0.0004, but even at that very same conference, they said the likelihood is it's going to go to 5, maybe 10. Well, going on these goalposts, which have, at least in terms of decisions being made thus far by the airport, you have stuck to that 20 parts per trillion that came from the EPA. Now the EPA, the very same people who gave you that number to work with, is now lowering it. Whether it gets low to 10 to 5 to something, it's going down, likely to go under my level and some of my other neighbors' level, which is the primary reason from my perspective to request. And I truly appreciate the comments of everybody from Mr. Gaspar to Jeanette and others as well, who are very seriously considering continuing the bottled water. I thank you. I think that's, as I said before, I think that's the right thing to do because it is changing. But I don't want to think that it's so complicated that we're changing. The Airport Commission has been following that 20 parts per trillion, and now that number is going to change, and it's going to go down. And
Excuse me, Mr. McKay, for clarification, because I was under the impression, and I'd like our professionals to correct me, I was under the impression that the 20 parts per trillion came from the Massachusetts DEP, and the federal EPA is the one now rolling it down to a lower number. Again, I'm not disputing, I just want to clarify that.
And to be honest, Mr. Rafter, that may be accurate. I'm not following it that closely. I retired and I'm trying to get away from too many controversies being at the hospital.
Bottom line is that, yeah, they're recognizing that it's
right. It's going down. But
it's going the wrong direction, if you will, whatever,
You're right. It's going in a direction that most of us recognize it's likely going to go in because we're all learning more about it, and it's not good. So that being the case, the other thing I wanted to say was to Mr. Gaspar, in terms of putting it down, I'm curious if it went down the airport property, the pipeline down to Matacashan, did the regulations truly state that it couldn't go 3, 5, 6 feet over to the right and be on the property of Ms. Huber and Mr. Ross and others, so that, because Mark Willett said to me very clearly that if it was on airport property, Wanacon couldn't touch it. Now, if you guys can come up with an easement on that, and I've heard you suggest that, and I appreciate that as well, great. Because right, practically it's there. It's money spent, it's water there. So if it's within your capability, that would be different from what Mr. Willett said to me before, that Wanacon couldn't touch it. If that's within your capability of doing so, great. I think that's another wise suggestion to consider as far as that's concerned. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. We'll certainly investigate it. We couldn't go outside of the airport. It would have been we would have needed easements from the abutting property owners. So, it doesn't really matter if you're 1 inch or 10 feet.
Well, giving you the easement. Given the concerns we've said, the easements would have been granted. I can speak for Mr. Ross. I can speak for Mr. Huber. They would have given it to you in a heartbeat.
I don't know if Mr. Lasner, if you want to keep, I think the question now is there a way to maybe make that work through Mr. Marx's suggestion? I think is a good one. Is that something that we can, that we may or may not be able to do? Also, we'll have to have counsel involved in that. Your points, and I think that, again, not to, I don't want to cut this off early, but I don't obviously want to, keep it going because everyone's saying the same thing. But is there a way that both legal, airport staff, commissioners' concerns, as stated well by Mr. Buscarin in terms of being very cognizant of revenue diversion, because of the all of the circumstances in totality, is there a way that their policy could be crafted such that the water could continue for a finite period of time? And I think that's what or perhaps the service provided from the other direction. I don't know. But I'd ask that, if the commission is, with the consent of the commission, that, the staff, that we have work with legal counsel and our staff and our consultants to see what we might be able to craft. Commissioners, is that acceptable, or any other questions or concerns?
Sounds good.
I agree with that.
I concur. We need to do everything we can to try to, keep them safe, and that's the bottom line. I think everybody on the commission feels that way, and we're trying to, play within the rules that we were given by the, what we're limited to do. By the same token, I don't think anybody should put at risk either. So I agree with you.
Okay. Thank you all. We, appreciate your time, certainly hear you, and we'll continue to work on this, and it will be on the agenda for the next meeting.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'd
Yeah.
like to dismiss Mr. Sukup. Council will be with us for executive session.
Sure thing. Mr. Sukop, anything you want to add, or you want to sign off?
No, I think I'm all set.
Okay.
Unless there's any other questions for me.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you for attending. Okay. With that, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is for election of officers and to assign subcommittee members. So Ms. Topham, welcome back. You were successfully reappointed as the challenger. So our commission has stayed the same, and we'll open up the floor for nominations for chair and then vice chair.
I nominate Arthur Gasparo for chair.
I'll second that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'd be honored to serve. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate it and do my best.
Thank you for your work.
Is there a nomination for vice chair?
I nominate Andrea Planzer.
And is there a second?
Second.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, we'll take to a vote. Mr. Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer, I assume you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
Thank you.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Thank you. Thank you all. Subcommittee members, I have the, let me just bring up the list. I can share my screen. Does anybody want to make any changes or be on any different subcommittees than as currently we're serving on? And if not, I think there could just be a motion to keep them the same, but if anyone wants to change anything up, certainly open to that discussion. No, seems like everybody's good. So are we going to keep, I guess, if I don't hear any other discussion, I don't know if that would take a vote. I think we could just keep the subcommittees the same by unanimous consent.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not hearing anything different. We'll continue on this way. And then we'll move on to discussing our meetings, in person, hybrid, and remote. So I mean, I could turn it over to Mr. Rafter, but we've talked about it. And the in-person is, without a change in legislation, is not an option after this meeting. And oh, Mr. Beccaria, please correct me if I state anything, or do you mind just?
Sorry to pop in at.
No, thank you.
I was listening throughout. I didn't think you need me for the last topic. Just the brief update there is that both the House and Senate have, maybe you were going here, so sorry to preempt you. Both the House and Senate have passed bills to extend this Friday's deadline. The Senate, I think, is planning to extend it, would plan to extend it to December 23, the House to April 23, with at least one member of the House suggesting that, hey, let's just make this thing permanent because it's for remote. There is very likely going to be a reconciliation that allows some extension. It may or may not come before the 15th. So that's just background, not policy, again, of what you might want to do, but just to complicate things a little bit more for you. You might be able to do more remote.
Thank you. Well, I guess the question comes to the commission. Do we want to go back to in person, even if you can do remote? So we certainly have that option, and we'll be meeting in the trailer. The other option is, and I don't know if the hybrid stays an option under current legislation or not. Mr. Macarius?
Hybrid would become the sort of old school hybrid, pre-2020 hybrid, where the chair has to be there and there may need to be an excuse for others. That's assuming no extension, but if there's an extension, it's likely to be either fully remote or at least hybrid, with no need for personal reasons, et cetera.
Right. And so it's in person, hybrid, or remote. And the hybrid, as I understand it, has some complications in terms of the recording and the staff having how that gets set up as a webinar. My understanding was that if we had in-person meetings, we could still have, and maybe there might be multiple definitions of hybrid, I'm not quite sure, but if it was what we called an in-person meeting, as I understand it, the open meeting law hasn't changed. So we still would do it the way we used to. Essentially, if a commissioner wasn't on island, you could still call in, and as long as you follow all the rules of roll call and the rules that sort of the way we did it before in the community meeting room. So it'd be in person, but you still could do that. You could still have consultants, call in, as said, and perhaps I think that with the greater improvement of technology, you might be able to have them now, on video, even though it's not called a hybrid meeting, it would be an in-person meeting, but you could probably, participate in that manner if I'm understanding that right. Again, I haven't been into this trailer yet, but that's sort of the way it was explained to me. I think the real question, for the commission is, do we want to, if we're able to continue on in this format, do we want to maintain it? Or do you want to go back to, or do you want to start using the trailer? I honestly could go either way. Open it up to discussion. Mr. Buscarin, you seem to have a thought.
Well, you know what? I've gotten lazy and stupid, and this is an easy way to do it. I have to say, it beats getting in the car and driving the many miles from Sconset into town. So I would keep what we have. And also because I plan to be away out of the country in September and October, that I can participate more meaningfully this way than I can calling in. So I kind of vote to keep the Zoom thing the way it is.
And I think, and I'll see what everyone has to say, but I think that if we were going to do that, it would probably be a motion along the lines of or a decision to meet remotely as long as you can legally. And if we couldn't, then obviously our next meeting would just simply be posted in person. Any other commissioners, how you guys feel about the in-person versus this?
I can do in person when it's light till 8 o'clock. I can't drive in the dark. So that would be, I would have to have a ride home. Somebody in my family could bring me to the meetings. That's one consideration.
So it seems like another vote for this.
I'm good with this, and I'll drive you home if we have to.
Just don't
I
deliberate.
have
No,
to if I'm home.
just no continued deliberations. Does that work for you, Ms. Planzer?
Yes, I could go either way, but I like that. Yeah.
All right, so it seems that we're under agreement that we will continue to meet via Zoom, remotely, I should say, as long as the law allows us to, and if at such time that when we need to post for our next meeting, that's not a legal option, then we'll see everybody at the trailer. Seem all right? Okay. Tom or no, anything to add to that? That works. Okay, thanks. Next up, we have to approve, is the union, Mr. Rafter, is that
No,
ready?
We're still waiting for the final version from legal.
All right, the floor is yours, Mr. Rafter, for our report.
Thank you. On the project side of the house, the crew quarters project, Mr. Lasden has reached out to a number of architects, and we've heard back from one so far that said they're too busy, but thank you for their interest. The Hagedorn hangar construction was temporarily on hold due to an illness with the contractor and a back order of insulation, but they're back working. Terminal optimization project, a preliminary draft concept approaches were received. There's a meeting set up for July 25th at 1 o'clock to discuss these alternatives and next steps. The HVAC controls project was delayed due to submittals. However, the pre-construction meeting was held, and they've assured us that they will have the project complete by the end of September. Taxiway Golf, we're still waiting a grant from the FAA, the master plan update, the whatever version now, final scope has been approved by FAA, and we're working to get an IFE so we can get that started, McFarland, and get underway. And the non-standard geometry study kickoff meeting was held last week, and they expect that project to take about another 10 months. On the IFB RFP status, the security system maintenance is out on the street. It went out yesterday. Proposals are due on the 8th. For the OPM services on the terminal, as well as the housing project, we're waiting to get a little further along in the process so that they can better define the level of effort that's necessary and then provide us with pricing. Taxiway Golf, we received the 2 bids, are still under review, and Sun Island Road RFP proposals are due August 17th. On the operational side of the house, you may be aware that on Saturday, July 2nd, a lightning strike took out our fuel farm as well as parts of our security system. And I just want to thank staff, Addie and Noah on the fuel farm, and Joe and Robbie on the security system. They did an excellent job. The farm was back, the security system was up fairly quickly. And our special thanks too to our contractor and subcontractor, Track Building and Trask Petroleum. They were at the contractor was actually here on site on Saturday, diagnosing it on the phone with the subcontractor. Subcontractor flew in first thing Sunday morning, had the parts and had it back up and running by 9 o'clock. And even with that outage, our July 4th weekend sales, although the fuel gallons were down over last year by about 19%, last year was a record year, they still exceeded the gallons sold for the years 2011 through 2020 individually. So we're still pumping a lot of fuel. Total sales for the 4th of July weekend were up 16%, driven mainly by the price of fuel though. Just a couple other notes. As we've done in the past, we've granted permission to an applicant for a First Amendment application, provide information to people in need on the Fridays in July near the gazebo. So if you see people handing out leaflets and things, that's been approved. And staff is working on logistics for a VIP visit this weekend, Friday and Saturday. That's going to consume quite a bit of staff time. And just a quick summary on the statistics. Year-to-date employments are up over not only last year, but also higher than 2018, 19, and 20. Many of the seasonal saw increases due to starting earlier in May. Southern Airways has seen an increase, particularly in the Providence market. Overall, the Boston market was up 5% or 99 passengers, and Kennedy was up 82% or 832 passengers for May. So that's good indicators right there of what the summer is going to bring, hopefully. And on the personnel note, we're still looking for a mechanic if anybody knows anyone, and we're processing a number of seasonal staff. One other note, I will be out on travel for the August meeting. However, if we're going to be doing it in Zoom, I can attend via Zoom. So And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Rafter. Well done, everyone, especially dealing with something like that lightning strike over a very busy weekend. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Mr. Rafter?
I have a question, please. Last month, I asked about the stanchions that were by the entryway for the by Tradewinds tent. Was there any resolution to that, or what you were having a meeting, and how did that go, please?
We looked into replacing them, first of all, with some planters, and we've researched the availability. I believe Linda has found some locally, and we're looking at, they've designated, they moved some rental cars. If you're looking out to the street, the rental cars are on the right. They're now going to be on the left past the tent. And where they were are designated for pickup, because people have a tendency of, waiting for their to pick people up. So we're having them pull into the stalls, and we've moved those horses or whatever they are back a little bit, because that area is designated just for drop off, so that we can keep the flow moving. It seems to be working pretty well, but the appearance of those are not very pretty. So we're going to try to block off a little area there, though, so that the passengers can get from the tent to the ramp safely. And we'll hopefully do that a little more aesthetically pleasing with some planters or something.
Another question. As you all know, we had a terrible fire. Does our fire truck able to go to help the situation or not? Or is it have to be on board?
We respond when requested by the fire department, and we'd be glad to go. And I even told staff, if it means temporarily shutting down the airport, if we got to go do it, if it's saving lives, we got to do what we got to do. If they call, we can respond. We did respond with a bus to pick up the off-island firefighters and bring them to the scene. So, but yeah, our folks are ready to go anytime. If we get the call, we'll go.
Thank you.
I must say, though, our equipment is not really designed for that type of fire, but.
Well, I know, but anything could help. Everything could help. And thank God everyone got out safe. That's the one thing.
And our local department did an excellent job.
Yes, they did.
Thank you. Any other comments on Mr. Rafter's report? Moving on to commissioners' comments. Anybody have anything?
I did mine already.
Future agenda items or just general comments? Okay, hearing none. We'll go back to another round of public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address the commission? Mr. Rosenbaum.
Hello. Mina had just sent me an email, unfortunately a day late and a dollar short, to listen in on your PFAS discussion, which is obviously a situation we are having here on the vineyard as well. So I guess he will update me on that. We're supposed to get together on Friday to have a discussion of what's going on here in the vineyard. I'll be happy to share anything if anybody has any questions. And I know have you already done your executive session?
We have not, but I would offer that our meeting video will be posted in the next day or two on YouTube, and you certainly could always review that too as well if you would like to. But just a very brief recap is in addition to the investigations that are ongoing, we're currently trying to resolve or work through bottled water service, and to certain extents, and neighbors with concerns, and probably just like you, dealing with grant assurances combined with community concerns and general health concerns. Not easy.
Pretty much sums it up. And I don't know if you want to, I'd be happy to share what we're doing in terms of the litigation against the manufacturers, because we are also involved in that endeavor as well. So if you want to join that, I'd be happy to. Otherwise, I'll sign off.
Maybe we keep the litigation discussion out of the public session perhaps.
So I said, if you want me to join the executive session, I would join. Otherwise, I will.
I
go
think
about
we're
my-
okay for right now, unless everybody feels different, but I appreciate that for sure.
All right, then.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Rosenbaum.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
With that, any other public comment? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for general law, chapter 30A, section 21A, to review the executive session minutes enumerated on the agenda for possible release, and the minutes from May 10th, 2022 for review and possible release. Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to pursuing legal claims against the manufacturer of PFAS and other potential sources of PFAS, where the chair has determined an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on litigating position of the airport. And clause 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for contract negotiations with non-union personnel, including the airport manager. Not to return to open session. Is there such a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll
Is there a
second.
Has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Lasden.